Hello friends, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Manish Shrestha, working as Assistant Professor at Haryana School of Business, GJ University of Science and Technology, Hisar. Today, we are going to discuss about the topic Understanding Performance Appraisal. Before starting the discussion, let's have a look at the contents. The discussion will start with introduction about the topic, followed by relevance of performance appraisal, objectives of performance appraisal, essentials for performance appraisal, process of performance appraisal, common errors at the time of appraisal, common hurdles at the time of appraisals, and at the end we will summarize. The learning objectives of today's topic is to understand the relevance of performance in a business organization and to get familiar with the process of conducting performance appraisal. An important component of performance management process is performance appraisal. Performance in an organization is directly related to its employees. If the employees are performing well, organizations would achieve its objectives, but the performance of all the employees are not same. Two different people will perform differently on a same assigned job under given circumstance. The variation occurs due to difference in various factors like psychographic, demographic, and physiology. The differences generate a need to go for certain evaluation mechanism for measuring the performance of an employee. This is done in order to ascertain whether the employees are working effectively and efficiently or not. Evaluation of their work performances is must in such cases. Such evaluation constitutes performance appraisal system. Through performance appraisal, we can assess the productivity, effectiveness, quality, and timeliness of an employee's output. If an employee is found good on the above criteria of performance measurement, then we can tag him as a good performer. Performance appraiser evaluates the employee on the basis of their actual performance against the preset benchmarks and conveys the outcome of the evaluation to him. Performance appraisal is an outgoing process and it is dependent upon several other inputs such as committed workforce, willingness of employees, availability of standards, etc. The basic purpose of performance appraisal is to check whether the efforts of employees are in right direction or not. It is conducted through adopting a scientific approach in order to avoid any kind of biasness. Let's have a look at few of the accepted definitions and meanings of performance appraisal. Let's have a look at few of the accepted definitions and meanings of performance appraisal. A performance appraisal is a formal, structured system of measuring and evaluating an employee's job-related behavior and outcomes to discover how and why the employee is performing presently on the job and how the employee can perform more effectively in the future so that the employee, organization, and society will benefit. Performance appraisal may be defined as any procedure that involves setting work standards, assessing the employee's actual performance relative to these standards, and providing feedback to the employee with the aim of motivating that person to eliminate performance deficiencies or to continue to perform above par. Performance appraisal is about ascertaining the value of a person's work performance by assessing an employee's strengths and developmental needs using different measurements and evaluation methods. Performance appraisal is an integral part of larger human resource system. The outcome of performance appraisal acts as an input for various human resource related decisions. Performance appraisal generates a sense of belongingness among employees that their efforts are moving in the right direction for the achievement of organizational goals. It makes the employees aware about the minimum standard of accepted performance and anything below that is not good. It also put emphasis on the outcomes of poor, average or good performances. Performance appraisal creates room to identify the training and development requirements of an employee. On the basis of performance appraisal, an employee's career could be planned. It also provides protection to management against any litigation arising out of their appraisal-based actions. Relevance of performance appraisal. Performance appraisal of employees is useful to improve the effectiveness of performance management system in more than one ways. Performance appraisal provides a basis to take various manpower related decisions such as recruitment, promotion, succession planning. It enables identification of training requirement of an individual. It creates an environment of fairness and justice in the organization. It also provides input to the employee to self-assessment of efforts. It removes the communication gap between managers and employees. Both the parties get each other's point of view related to outcome of efforts. It provides a strong basis to relate results with rewards. It helps in reassigning of jobs as per the capability of an employee. It reduces grievances in the organization. Objectives of performance appraisal. Generally, performance appraisal system is viewed as a system that helps in deciding and justifying the financial components of individual's income. For example, if the performance of an employee is more than the expected, offer more incentives. Similarly, poor performance at the job results into pay cuts. Insignificant attention was paid to the development options. Money was considered as the only motivator for good performance. It was felt that fear of getting a pay cut would motivate an employee up to the expected level. Although at very basic level, this approach worked but failed to produce extraordinary performances. Over a period of time, it was observed that monetary incentives are not the only source to get the higher level of performances, as people getting similar salary with similar work abilities possess different level of commitment and motivation. Practically, this evidence extends the purview of performance appraisal beyond the reward outcomes. Now, the objectives of performance appraisal encompasses providing a basis for taking employee development decisions. Input of performance appraisal is now used as a tool to guide and motivate employees toward development of individual skills and competencies. The negative outcomes of individual performance reported through performance appraisal could use to provide constructive feedback. Constructive feedback aims at providing information about the performance lacking areas, identification of training needs to develop skills and competencies, and offering support to do it in the form of charting out an improvement plan. Following an improvement plan backed by newly gained skills and competencies helps the employee to perform better and plan his career for future. On the other hand, the performance appraisal system is used for taking employee-related administrative decisions such as promotion, transfer, termination, etc. Performance appraisal input is also helpful in redesigning the jobs. Overall, broad objectives of performance appraisal seem contradictory to each other. It's a conflict between objectivity and subjectivity. It is tough to quantify everything and equally unjustifiable to ignore subjective aspects of performance. Administrative objective of performance appraisal demands action for performance, while developmental objectives ask for providing constructive feedback followed by supporting the employee in developing skills and competencies. A proper balance between the administrative actions and developmental activities is required. Apart from these two major objectives of performance appraisal, there exist few more, such as to retain talent through connecting performance with justified reward, to inculcate a feeling of fairness and justice among employees through using transparent and unbiased system for appraising performance, to identify the potential of an employee, to increase individual accountability for the performance. The expected standards of performance are clear and all the individuals in the organization knows about the outcome of good, average or poor performance. Let's have a look at few of the essentials of performance appraisal. Before introducing a performance appraisal system to evaluate the performance of the employees, it is important to get clarification on certain issues. These issues are what to measure and who should appraise the performance. What to measure? If you are in a position to measure something, there are all possibilities to manage it. Performance appraisal requires a consensus between measures of performance. An appropriate performance measurement ensures expectations are met, gives a signal about financial burden of poor performance, supports optimum utilization of resources, and identifies areas requiring priority attention. Before stating that measurement is related to measuring what is of importance, it is important to find out various priority areas. Every activity of the organization could buy a measure, leading to large number of measures available to assess. It is stakeholders only who can zero in to the measures which fall into the high priority category. It is suggested to avoid measurement related problems such as considering too many measures, considering measures unrelated to strategy, outcome of that measurement is ambiguous, and measures not in line with the structure of the organization. A measure must be related to strategy, verifiable, precise, and provide a basis for resultant action. For an individual working in an organization, measures are identified in the backdrop of quantity, quality, cost, and timing. For example, unit output, number of complaints, output per employee, backlogs, and cost per unit of production could be the measures for assessing performance of a plant manager. At the time of determining what to assess, it is important to consider outcomes as well as behaviors that results into such outcomes. Who should appraise the performance? Traditionally, immediate supervisor is responsible for conducting the performance appraisal. With the passage of time, efforts are being done to bring more and more objectivity in the appraisal system. Number of appraisers increase. Appraisals by using different options strives to get better picture of performance appraisal can be done through immediate supervisor. He is at the most strategic position to judge the performance of an employee. He is in direct contact with employee on a day-to-day basis. A supervisor is also responsible to get the desired results from the employee. Peer group. Peer review is based on the premise that people who are working with the employee are having more knowledge about the individual and the working in comparison to a manager who is connected professionally only. Popularity and ill feelings are considered two major factors that could bias the whole appraisal by peer group. Third is rating committees. These are using more than one supervisor to assess the performance of an employee. It generally includes 3 or 4 supervisors closest to the employee. Multiple rating is considered as a good option as it reduces the risk of biasness during appraisal. It also normalizes the extreme appraisals. Then there is appraisal through self-assessment. It is just like acting as a rater for your performance. Self-assessment information is acting as a valuable input for a supervisor. Self-assessment completes the groundwork of appraisal for a manager. It involves critical thinking by an employee about his strengths and weaknesses. Self-assessment puts a pressure on the employee as he feels more accountable for the results. In general, an employee is tend to assess himself on a higher level of performance in comparison to supervisor or peers. Subordinates. An employee could also be assessed from the subordinates. Subordinates are selected as appraiser on the grounds that they closely observe the working of their supervisor on a regular basis. Various measures, especially behavior related, could be easily assessed through subordinate assessment. Enmity with the supervisor or groupthink could be the reason for biasness while doing this kind of performance appraisal. Stakeholders. A popular way of conducting a performance appraisal would be through all the stakeholders that are connected to the assessee in any manner. For example, a manager can be assessed through immediate boss, peers, subordinates, clients, intermediaries, and suppliers. Such an appraisal provides a comprehensive review of the performance and packed with least chances of biasness. Process of performance appraisal. An organization is free to devise its own appraisal mechanism and no two organizations follow the same procedure. In a broader sense, every performance appraisal process follows certain basic steps such as to initially the purpose of appraisal is determined for which appraisal system is used. Generally, the performance appraisal is conducted for two broad purposes, namely evaluation and improvement. If the input of appraisal is used for promotion or rewards, then it will fall under evaluative purpose. On the contrary, usage of appraisal input for improving the performance of an employee, it serves the improvement purpose. Once the purpose of performance appraisal is clear, a suitable technique is identified to conduct the appraisal. Choice of technique depends upon the context in which it is being used. Choosing an appropriate technique might result poor appraisal and eventual dissatisfaction among employees. It is generally suggested to use a technique on which managers and employees give their consent. Balanced scorecards, management by objectives, 360-degree appraisal are few of the popular performance appraisal techniques. Just like a suitable technique to appraise, it is equally important to identify an appropriate appraiser. An appraiser must be aware about the philosophy of the organization and competent enough to understand and conduct a proper appraisal. The manager must be known for the fairness and justice. An appraisal by competent manager is always taken positively by the employees. Although appraisers are chosen carefully, still there is a need to train them in order to serve the purpose of the whole activity. Training should be provided to upgrade the appraisers about newer techniques to appraise and their usage. On the similar grounds, employees should also be trained. Their training should relate to expected behaviors during the period of appraisal. A cooperative employee makes the whole system work correctly and faster. After the training of managers and employees, required documents related to appraisal system are forwarded. These documents are generally appraisal forms and related guidelines. The forms required employees to mention their achievements, underperformances on the basis of self-assessment. It also incorporates support required to further improve the performance. Support could be training related or skill development related. The form, complete in all aspects, is returned to the manager for further processing. Then the manager evaluates the performance of the employee and assigns some ranking or score for the performance. Then he marks his observations and discuss it with the higher authority for further review. The comments of reviewing officers are finally noted. Once the review is complete, it is communicated to the respective employees for their observations and comments. After agreement by both the parties, the performance appraisal information is used as input to business intelligence system. Performance appraisal is susceptible to various errors and biases. Presence of a bias could hamper the effectiveness of performance appraisal. Few of these biases are halo effect. When the performance of an employee is evaluated on a single dominating characteristic, it overshadows rest of the efforts of the employee. Central tendency. When all the employees are assigned average scores, it actually hides extraordinary good and extremely poor performances. Tough rating. When an appraiser is too strict in assessing the performance of an employee, this error generally occurs when employee shows extraordinary performance. Easy rating. When an appraiser becomes too lenient while appraising the performance of an employee. It could be done in order to prevent any kind of confrontation that might arise due to correct ratings. Position influence. This error occurs when an employee at a higher position is overrated while those at lower positions are underrated. Spillover effect. It says you are as good as your last assignment. This philosophy of rating results in an error due to spillover effect. When the employees are evaluated on the basis of their previous evaluations, spillover effects came into existence. First impression. Raters sometimes get biased at the evaluation of performance on the basis of their first interaction, whether good or bad, of the employee. Similar dissimilar. Sometimes evaluators give biased evaluation of an employee just on the ground how the employee is similar or dissimilar from the evaluator in terms of thinking, approach or behavior. Emotion effect. Sometimes rater gets unjustifiably influenced due to emotional considerations of employee such as problem faced in personal life. Generally, a rating above actual is given to such employee, defeating the purpose of unbiased performance appraisal. Such errors should be removed at the earliest to get the actual benefit out of performance appraisal system. In order to execute performance appraisal program, managers have to spend lot of time and resources which could be used for other critical tasks. In spite of various advantages, performance appraisal is criticized on several grounds. So let's have a look on common hurdles that occur at the time of appraisal. Choosing a wrong standard for appraising the performance frustrates the employee. Providing negative appraisal is difficult to handle for some employees. After receiving such feedback, they feel highly demotivated and opt for strategies like violence or go slow. Not every time the employee is aware about how appraisal is done and by whom. It gives a sense of insecurity. The doubt results into a feeling among employees that they are being judged on different standards. Lack of communication is the major cause for that. Sometimes managers deliberately give wrong assessment to avoid any kind of confrontation. It actually defeats the validity of ratings and actions taken based on the said ratings. And finally, a manager without proper choice of appraisal technique and lack of training could do blunders with the performance appraisal of employees. Just copying what the competitor is doing does not solve the purpose. To summarize the discussion, performance appraisal is an ongoing process and it is dependent upon several other inputs such as committed workforce, willingness of employees, availability of standards, etc. The basic purpose of performance appraisal is to check whether the effort of employees are in right direction or not. Performance appraisal is about ascertaining the value of a person's work performance by assessing an employee's strengths and developmental needs using different measurements and evaluation methods. Performance appraisal provides a basis to take various manpower related decisions such as recruitment, promotion, succession planning. It enables identification of training requirements of an individual and creates an environment of fairness and justice in the organization. Performance appraisal has administrative and developmental as its broad objective. Before going for appraisal process, it is important to identify what has to be measured and who will measure it. Performance appraisal process involves identifying purpose, determining standards, training managers and employees, selecting a suitable technique, distributing relevant documents, self-assessment by an employee, observation of rater, and finally review discussion. A manager should ensure that the whole process of performance appraisal should be free from any kind of hindrance and bias. Happy learning!